The Monday, October 7th, 2013 meeting of the Falls Church Planning Commission is now in order. Ms. G, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Hockenberry? Here. Mr. Meeks?
Here.
Mr. Rankin?
Here.
Ms. Rogers?
Here.
Ms. Teets?
Here.
Mr. Wodiska?
Here.
Mr. John is absent.
Would someone please move to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second to adopt the agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion is carried. Do we have planning commission reports this evening? I'm looking down at this end. Any planning commission reports? No?
Went to the EDA, and they're, of course, looking at some same things we are tonight. With the 20-foot setback, they were considering approving that, but having special exceptions considered by planning, you know, and the lots that are not so, that are so shallow. They really are looking, they had to look at all the by right zoning business use policy, and they were thinking, you know, they were going through them one by one, and but then they finally came up with the fact that perhaps we should put them all under a special exception type of situation. Some are so outdated they should just flat be removed. But they were saying that they were definitely for the one thing we're going to consider tonight on the assisted living, but not to refer to the plan that's come before us at that point. And they're also doing a lot of work to see if they could get, see what kind of funds they're going to get from the sale of the water, or no, from the sale of the Harris Teeter site, to see if there might be any money for land banking. So it was really quite an active meeting. Thank you. Oh, and I also went to TJ tonight, except for the entranceway. Really, the inside really is, for an old TJ person, you know, it was really something to see. The new library is awesome.
On the sale of the Harris Teeter property, that isn't what we're considering tonight.
No, this is the other one with the
That's the post
Podolnik.
office and the Podolnik, okay.
See, because they put it under the EDA purchase,
Right.
okay? But this other one, they were asking some more questions on that one. But it's the money coming from the big stuff.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Hockenberry. This will go to receipt of petitions from the audience. Are there any petitions from those in attendance of items not on our agenda? Seeing none, we will move on to the planning director's report. Mr. Snyder?
Yes, members of the commission. We've been very busy. I wanted to report we do have a new employee who started today, Akita Ruzzi, who comes to us from the City of Alexandria. She's been working there as a zoning technician, and she's going to be working in our development services area, replacing Joe Hodges. She has a background that I think will be very helpful for the city. In addition to her experience working in Alexandria, she has a degree in architecture from Howard University and a master's in planning from Cornell. Very enthusiastic, good addition to our staff. We also will be recruiting shortly to add another planning position, replacing Elizabeth Perry. I think I mentioned that Paul Stoddard has been appointed to fill Wendy Block Sanford's position. And so we're trying to move ahead on those things so that we have sufficient folks to handle the work that's coming forward. We have learned today that there will be a refiling of the 400 Washington Street SE special exception. This was the office building at Washington and Columbia. The developer and the attorney indicated they will be filing that this week, so that will be back on your agenda. Also, we have been working closely on a couple of items you worked on administratively with us. The Easter Seals project is going forward. If you've been watching that building be transformed, the curb and gutter is going in on Hutton Avenue. I think the paving is supposed to happen this week. Ornamental lights along Hutton on the sidewalk will be going in. Also, the 2 office buildings at 500 and 510 Annandale that are being remodeled for occupancy. The pulmonary group that's moving out of Arlington is going to be opening up midweek next week, and then as they get everybody acclimated, they'll be having a more formal effort. But we're working with Public Works on the landscaping and other items there. They're also giving us easements along Maple, Annandale, and Fairfax Road so that future public improvements, sidewalks, et cetera, will be more possible because we're going to have wider areas to do that in. So they've been very helpful to us in that regard. So those are several examples of older buildings that are being refurbished in the area that have been vacant or underutilized for some time. So in addition to new development, I think it's important to note the renovations that are going on. I did also briefly go to see the TJ addition this evening, and I think there will be other tours as well, and that looks like it's turned out very well. Sizable rooms, well-integrated design into the existing project, so I know the commission worked very hard on that, along with the Architectural Advisory Board, so we're beginning to see some of the fruits of work that we've been doing. Looking ahead, the stormwater issue looks like it will probably be deferred on October 28th to sometime in November with a hearing by the commission on the 4th of November. We have some advertising issues to hit the right days in advance of the hearing, and so it doesn't work for October 21st, which is what we had been anticipating. So that will be delayed, we believe, to your meeting on the 4th of November. Also looking ahead, one of our items tonight, the small area plan, we're hoping to go to City Council on the 15th of October this next week, and then working in earnest on the small area plan update for City Center to see if we can't have a second meeting and have a draft plan that you all can review along with the community. So it's going to be a busy fall, and we're looking forward to working with you on all those various issues. Also, I would note the 610 Fulton case, the HARB did approve a revision to the plan so that that could move forward. There was a settlement that took place, and a good discussion about needed process improvements, which we put into place. Ms. G and myself and others were at that hearing recently, and we're hoping that will move forward now and the building rebuilt to the design that was originally approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have no old business on our calendar, so we'll move on to the new business. And our first order of new business is the South Washington Street Small Area Plan. We're going to be looking to give a recommendation to City Council on that particular plan. So I understand you have a presentation for us, Mr. Snyder?
Yes, we do, and I'd like to introduce again to the public and to the commission Garrison Kitt, who's here and has been the primary author and planner working on this project. You do have in front of you a memorandum which recommends that you provide feedback and comments to City Council for adoption. We have a list of edits and attachments that are part of that staff report. We have been going to all of the various boards and commissions. Last week we were at Parks and Recreation. The week before we were at the Historic Commission as well as the HARB. It also has been seen by CACT and the EDA, and we have attached the comments from those groups to the memorandum. Generally, I would say everything has been very positive in terms of feedback. We also have comments from the Chamber of Commerce. Those are all attached to the memorandum. We also did a walking tour of the area for the Housing and Human Services staff, and that revealed the need for, increased investment in that area by the city. So what I'd like to do is go ahead and go through a PowerPoint presentation which is similar to one that we've done for other groups so that the public and others can be acquainted with the plan itself. And I know some of you have seen some of this before, but I think it's, since we're on the we're looking at going forward with adopting this plan. It's important to go through this. We are looking at this area, which is some 43.26 acres. It's the third largest of the planning opportunity areas, and you can see in this map the location along with the other opportunity areas where we are working on small area plans.
Let's put
Let
me put the lights.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much. We have, the commission and the council have approved the North Washington Street plan near the East Falls Church Metro Station. This is the South Washington Street plan with the star on it. And we are next going to be working on the city center area. So when these three small area plans are adopted, we will have completed the area plans for the Washington Street corridor. And there are a number of recommendations in this plan for the city center plan. At 43.26 acres, it's the third largest of these planning opportunity areas. First, we need to look at what the area looks like today. How well does it function? Garrison, if you can. This is an aerial where you can see some of the major development in the area, the Pearson Square and Tax Analyst buildings, and then a lot of older buildings and parking areas. So it does show an area that is in time and condition ready for revitalization. How's it working? What did residents tell us that they wanted? Those are some of the things we were looking at. It has a number of auto and industrial uses. These are shown in the starred locations. So it has been historically an area where we had a lot of cars and parking areas. One of them is the Saab dealership, which has gone out of business and will be the subject of a major redevelopment that you are looking at. We have a number of restaurants and that are popular and unique. These are shown in this. So we've seen an evolution in this area towards interesting food and other businesses who are using some of the older buildings to their advantage. Also, there is another layer of arts and culture in the area, and you can see in this graphic some of these sites that are throughout the area, from the historic Falls Church to the Tinner Hill Monument and the future Tinner Hill Center. And I would mention that you had at your places a memorandum from Cindy Mester where we are working hard to get funding to make real the promise of a heritage site there. And Northern Virginia Regional Park Authority approved $175,000 for a first phase project. So as a part of this plan, there will be follow-up to make that happen, and that will be coming back to you as an individual action item. The Galloway United Methodist Church, music conservatories, Creative Cauldron, Art Space, the Henderson House, a number of uses in this area which are very interesting and unique. But when you look at it dispassionately, you can see that a third of the developable land, next slide, is surface car parking. Typically, the properties are smaller buildings with paved parking lots around them. So looking at the existing zoning on the next slide, you can see that it is a combination of B2, the dark red, B3, general business, the orange, and we have some official design near the Falls Church in Washington and Fairfax Street. Also some transitional and some RM multifamily residential. The most dense areas, B2, allow the greatest height and development. The land use plan, the future land use plan on the books presently is almost all red. It's basically showing it as business. There's very little articulation of anything different. There is, however, the Virginia Village area on Shirley and Gibson Streets, which is a group of quadplexes, individually owned, which is shown for mixed-use redevelopment. And that's an area, as we go further into this, we're recommending a different approach. Looking physically at the area, Annandale Road and South Washington Street, you can see that the main focus seems to be moving cars, and there's not a lot of regard for people and pedestrians. It's not pedestrian friendly particularly, and not inviting. There are smaller streets such as Tinner Hill Street, which are kind of hidden, that are off of main roads. This is off Washington Street, where there are in fact no sidewalks. to let you connect to the neighborhood, but there are historic signs and markers at the state level. Looking at Hillwood Avenue in South Washington, we have this kind of connection, and we're looking to change that through a transit plaza. Now, at Maple Avenue and Tinner Hill Street, where you have the tax analyst and Pearson Square, there has been attention through the special exception process for attractive streetscape, trees, undergrounding, attractive sidewalks. Fiscally, from a financial point of view, it's one of the largest areas in the city with more than 30 acres of commercially zoned land. On the next slide, and there are 30-plus acres that are commercially zoned. The B2 does allow 75-foot buildings by right and up to 115 feet by special exception. If we look at the value of the land, it's $85 million. The buildings are at $70 million. Much of that value in the buildings, frankly, is in the Pearson Square and tax analyst buildings. But what that tells you is that when the buildings are worth less than the land, the area is really underperforming. So there is a lot of potential for redevelopment because of the age and size of these areas. We made that known at our public meetings in June, where we had a kickoff meeting at Columbia Baptist Church. We talked about potential in October with an arts and culture stakeholder meeting, and then presented the draft plan in April at Columbia Baptist Church to the public. What we're going through now is commission review and looking toward approval. This is an example of what kind of redevelopment could take place along Washington Street under the B2 zoning. In terms of our vision, we're looking to strengthen the arts and culture in the area. If you can go to the next slide, Garrison. Focus height and density, transition to residential uses, use shared parking to reduce parking requirements and make it easier to use, park once and shop and walk, provide pedestrian and bicycle access, creating placemaking features that create an identity for the area. So when you take this and say, what would this look like in terms of more of a planning effort, we saw the original plan that's adopted, that's just all red. This is showing Virginia Village being an area where we'd maintain housing with the possibility of consolidating it for future open space or community center use. Focusing higher density in the B2 area between Tinner, Washington, Maple, and Falls, Fairfax Road, and having medium density, moderate density on the edges in the areas that are generally zoned B3, and having a possible town center development area where we have a large consolidation, and this is between Douglas, Fairfax, Hillwood, and Annandale. There's been some confusion about this. This is not, the intention here is to try to have, because of the amount of acreage and the well-located site, to have a moderately dense area that could be a place like Market Common or Fairfax Center, a place where you could have retail and other activity with consolidated parking, because it's large enough to do something along those lines. So it has potential that other sites don't. There's been some speculation about that the plan calls for City Hall to be relocated here. That's not the case. That's not in the plan, not been talked about. It's really looking at this large block as a place that could be well developed. Also, there are areas for small offices and surface parking, and you'll see those on the south side of Hillwood, where we have a number of smaller businesses and small streets. Along the south side of South Washington Street, where we have neighborhoods up against the commercial, we have thin strips. We're looking at possibly doing loft apartments above retail. And you see in the green areas, the park that's proposed where the Meineke store is now, and the Tinner Hill site, which is also shown in green, reflecting the possible public use there. So we're looking to have moderate density that would provide a buffer between the higher density uses and existing residential areas. Then looking at the next slide, which shows how this would translate into more of a land use approach, we'd create a core commercial area. And this is where we're showing both the city center and the, excuse me, South Washington Street area, the area between Broad, Washington, Maple, and Tinner, where the B2 is an area where we have room for and access for higher density, taller office and commercial and hotel uses. The area on the other side of Broad Street between Park, Little Falls, and including the State Theater is an area where we have a number of very interesting and popular individual businesses, restaurants, retail, Brown's Hardware, CVS, and other uses that people use every day. They've been the subject of a lot of redevelopment schemes which have never happened, and we think, frankly, this is a better area to have as a core entertainment area, that we do appropriate infill rather than having them redevelop. Then we're also showing the Virginia Village area as an area that would transition from, rather than be redeveloped at higher densities, transition and be retained as affordable residential and eventually transitioning to park use with room for community uses. And then the edges could be mixed use, as shown in the blue and white stripes, with business areas between Hillwood, Douglas, Fairfax, and Washington. So that's kind of the pattern that's shown here. So if we compare that to what's existing, we can see this overlay. The blue area is the area where this redevelopment, more dense redevelopment would occur in the blue outline. Right now, that's small buildings and a lot of parking areas, and not very notable, but could be redeveloped, we think, appropriately. Now, some of the benefits of redevelopment, if we look at the next slide, you can see how some of these existing and new buildings could be developed with new streetscape, open space. You see on the right-hand side the new park that's proposed as a part of the Lincoln project, the reserve at Tinner Hill. And then on the lower slide on the left, if an area where Fox's Music were redeveloped, you might be able to have new development, put existing buildings in existing businesses in new buildings, and possibly create park or open space and preserve historic housing. Next slides are showing other examples of how some of these areas that are presently parking lots in low scale could be developed into a more dense city center core commercial area. And this is showing how Tinner Hill, the road you saw earlier, might cross Washington Street. The next slide shows the Tinner Hill Park, which I mentioned has funding, and mid-rise buildings that could replace former gas stations that are presently used for car repair and auto uses. Looking at the next slide, we're looking down Hillwood, where mid-rise buildings could be redeveloped, and you see in the green on the left the Easter Seals building, which I don't think is going to be green, but it's being redone right now, and that was the former warehouse that this commission helped us approve administrative changes to be redone for the Easter Seals project. It also shows new streetscape that would improve this street edge. The next slide shows the town center idea, where you could have retail and office and other uses around the edges near the Falls Church. This is suggesting an axial relationship between the historic church and provide parking, shared parking in the center. This is not a plan per se, but just shows how that large area could be developed in a way where you could park once and walk to a variety of uses. Trying to have less surface parking and less people having to park from place to place to place. In the next slide, you can see the existing conditions presently, and you can see why we're excited about the potential of this area for redevelopment. It's kind of an erratic arrangement of buildings, a lot of parking lots which aren't really organized well. And so the contrast, I think, is telling here about the potential for this area to be a well-designed area. So the next slide, I think, shows that again in terms of how that could be compared to how it is now. Looking at the reserve at Tinner Hill, the site presently has parking areas, small older buildings, car repair places, and lots of surface parking. You can see it next to Pearson Square and Tax Analyst. This is showing some slides. These are SketchUp models we did showing the scale of that area. And then looking at the yellow cab block, for example, again, these are ideas that could be used. They're not prescriptive per se, but we're trying to show what could happen under existing zoning. That building could be preserved, and the surface parking could go into, and along with retail, into a building that might have parking above in a arrangement where instead of surface parking, you could have ground floor retail and put the cabs and other uses above you. There's an area in Clarendon where the Orvis store, for example, has parking above the stores. It was previously a surface parking lot. Now it's retail and has extra parking for the area. So these are examples of things that can be done. Then looking at Coleman Motorsports, again, another major site. The Fairfax Falls Church line goes through the back there. Lots of parking and auto uses. This could be developed so that it would look like the next slide, which is showing mid-rise buildings along Hillwood and Washington with parking in the rear. And another arrangement showing, the next slide shows, well, what if you had a movie theater and retail with housing above and parking in the rear? So we're trying to explain how things could look. This shows also the transit plaza, which is part of this plan. Looking at the core commercial area, this is what we have now, and some of you have seen the renovations that have been taking place to some of the older buildings on the right. Those will be there for some time, but eventually the area could redevelop in the future to look something like the following slide, where we have streetscape, open space along the stormwater area, and again, trying to create a core business area with walkable features. Looking on West Fairfax Street, which some of you may have been down, it's kind of it's a city-owned street that's not very well maintained. We are looking, I think, with Public Works at could there be stormwater facilities put underground and then the area reworked. So we're trying to show how that could look with, you know, a bike share station, a small plaza, and make it a place where you might be able to have an event like an art fair or Taste of South Washington Street, or as we heard from one of the people at the Historic Commission, they used to have church and tavern days here. So this street has kind of been not very well used by the city, and if you go down there, you can see its potential. So it's a good place where we might want to invest CIP money and do something attractive because we own it. But presently, I wouldn't be I'm not very proud of how it's conditioned.
And it's historic.
And it's historic. It's the historic rolling road, and there is an historic sign there on a leaning pole that needs some attention. So anyway, we're just trying to show what we can do with what we have. So if we move on to the next slide, this is the Virginia Village area. These are quads owned individually. Some are owned by the city. Some are owned by individuals. Collectively, if the streets were vacated, they can serve as affordable housing for quite some time. But if collected, there might be a way to develop affordable housing or transfer development rights and have another 4 acres of park that could attach to Big Chimneys Park with room for a community center or ball fields or a bandstand. This is just showing there's room for a community center if you chose to have one. So this is potential where over time, like at Quincy Park in Arlington, the city could work to consolidate these properties rather than redevelop them with a large site. With the development we're talking about, there will be need for open space and community space, and this could add some 4+ acres over time to the Big Chimneys Park and make it more accessible to this area. Looking at transportation, and let's see, I missed one here. Fiscal performance. Presently, we're at an FAR of about 0.56, generates about $6 million a year. Looking towards more dense development where you can afford structured parking, 2.5 to 4 FAR, we could triple practically the tax revenue over time. So we think these areas are needed so we can have a more complete community. If we're going to build high schools and renovate elementary schools and fix up storm sewers and replace aging infrastructure, we need the tax base to be able to do that. We need people and jobs to patronize our businesses, and so the point of development is not for its own sake, but to make us a more complete community and to help us afford the things we need to afford. This shows graphically, I think, what we could be looking at. In terms of transportation, the slides you saw showed a lot of deficiencies. We need to improve pedestrian facilities, have curb extensions at intersections, have attractive pavers, increase the sidewalk widths, have crosswalk improvements, connect to Metro, look at shuttle buses, build the intermodal plaza, transit plaza, and in South Washington Street, slow down traffic and get lane widths down to 11 feet, which is perfectly fine for an urban street, so that we can have traffic calming and have room on sidewalks. Presently, you can't imagine building a 1-lane road. Well, we have less than 1-lane sidewalks. A person can't pass the telephone pole on many of our sidewalks, let alone a couple or someone with a baby carriage or someone in a wheelchair. We basically have 1-lane sidewalks with poles in the middle in many parts of our city. It's unacceptable. Interim improvement examples to building facades and streetscapes. We've seen some good examples of that here recently. They can increase the attractiveness of the area for residents. They can lead to other development coming forward. We can promote walkability and biking, promote our cultural amenities with streetscape design and murals. And overall, these things will help make the area more desirable for redevelopment. So looking at what that could look like and what some of those features are with streetscape, underground utilities, lighting, trees, benches, pedestrian connections. We've graphically shown this in the plan where these opportunities exist. So there are a lot of these areas. It's about an acre of sidewalk paving because it's about 41,000 feet, a little less than an acre plus crosswalk paving. So if we could build an acre of streetscape and lights and trees for pedestrians, we could begin to transform the area. Garrison has done a good job kind of saying, well, if we took all these areas with a reasonable rhythm, what would these things look like? So we've tried to do that. So what would this translate into in reality? If we look at the next slide, we can see that in front of Fox's Music, where we have plenty of sidewalk width, but we also have a lot of poles and wires and poor sidewalk materials, it could look like the left-hand slide with, modest investment. And this might be a pattern that would be there for a number of years until redevelopment could occur. But in the meantime, it's an attractive area that is good for business and will attract other businesses. You see the items, it's trees, benches, sidewalks, street lights, undergrounding wires, utility poles, awnings, some facade grants. So we think this is a good interim kind of approach. Another example is there's a seafood market on Maple Street. There's an asphalt sidewalk. There is very limited public improvements. This is what could be done with relatively modest cost if the city were to invest in sidewalks and trees and lights, and if the owner were to invest in some awnings and improvements. And we're showing here the example of a blank wall that could have a mural. This is, in fact, our newest Hall of Fame, Basketball Hall of Fame person from the city, Dr. Henderson, who's lived next door. That's just showing an example of creative things you can do. So that's an example of some of the things we think could happen. I mentioned edits to the plan. We've taken out the reference to Festival Street. I think the feeling was it's kind of overused and not well understood. We're really trying to talk about special streets that have flexible uses. We've clarified the town center concept, and this is a list of the changes that we've made. And we've added an action implementation matrix, which is on your at your places, and we'll show that in the next slide. We're looking at having specific actions. These are things we've been hearing as we've been going forward. Then we'd be following up with land use maps and zoning changes, and hopefully programming interim streetscape improvements and utility undergrounding, the CIP. And then work at actively marketing unique features of the area, arts and culture, restaurants, et cetera, to potential developers. So I know it was a lot, but all of this is in the plan and more. I think we've got an outstanding document, which I'm very proud to recommend to you for your recommendation to City Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. That was a great presentation. Even though we've seen it again, it clarified several things, particularly with the edits. I think what we should do is have people from the audience who wish to speak on this, and then we can go to. Please. Sure. Then we can go to Planning Commission comments. We have one speaker slip, Mr. Robert Young, and if anyone else is interested in speaking, please give Ms. G a speaker slip. You've done your own area plan here, Mr. Young?
Oh, yeah. He's done a lot of work on this.
My name is Robert Young. My address is 608 Timber Lane,
Is your microphone on? It's glowing. Okay. Green? Glowing green.
But it's glowing.
It's supposed to glow green.
I'll do that again for the record. My name is Robert Young. I live my residence is 608 Timber Lane. I'm going to try to be as brief as possible, but I may need the chair's indulgence for just a couple of minutes. Really like to make 3 points. The first is we very, very strongly support the area plan that the planning director has just presented to you. We think it's a great plan. As you know, we have a property that I want to talk about in a minute in that area, but it is one of the basically 4 gateways to the city. It's by far the poorest, it's ugly, it's terrible, and it needs city investment. Adopting this plan, your recommendation to the council that they adopt this plan, I think will go a very long way toward perhaps persuading the city sometime in the near future to provide some funding to connect the dots, if you will. We have the one shopping center that has been renovated. Our property on the opposite corner is almost finished. We will have, of course, the project down on the Saab dealership. And if all we did was connect those various projects with some decent sidewalks, some streetscape, and then the other item that I think is very important is Fairfax Street, which is essentially abandoned, ugly, unmaintained, owned by the city. I think the city really should be ashamed to have their property in that condition. I was reminded recently that that particular stretch of ground is the #1 stormwater management priority for the city, assuming that that program is adopted, which I'm confident it will be. The plan is to put a very large vault under that street to collect a great deal of water that presently is flooding Broad Street, the 100 block of Broad Street. Wouldn't it be nice if the city spent a few dollars, instead of putting asphalt back on top of the vault, maybe some bricks? I don't want to call it a festival street, but it's a place, as Jim suggested, that could be used for a lot of different things, but in any event could be made to look rather attractive instead of ugly. Maybe even plant a few flowers, who knows? My understanding is a determination has been made once again not to put that street through to South Washington. So it's a dead-end street, it's 1 block long, it's historic. Why not show some pride in the history of which the city abounds but takes very little advantage? The final point I'd like to make is I've handed out some pictures. Those show some of the ideas that I copied from Jim's presentation of what might be done in the way of streetscape, and also illustrates the work that we've done on that corner, which, as you can see from the pictures, was truly probably the ugliest corner in the city, and now we think is at least moderately attractive. Looks pretty darn good. We would have been paving today, the parking lots, but it rained, so we'll be doing it tomorrow. But we're pretty close to being finished. We're going to have what we think is a very good set of tenants. Instead of having slabs of granite all over the place, we will instead have Smashburger. Meat in the Box business has tremendously expanded, even during construction, and there's been construction now for some months. We think it's a good step in the right direction. We've invested over $100,000 in the streetscape and the landscaping, most of which I will point out is on city property. But the city doesn't have any money, or at least felt that it didn't have any money, to even get involved in extending the sidewalks 50 feet or 100 feet in either direction on Annandale and on South Washington. So I hope the Planning Commission will take an active role in urging the council to not only adopt this plan, but also to give serious consideration to providing some funding for that area. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Young.
And thanks for your indulgence.
Any comments? Okay, but wait, we have one more speaking slip. Mr. Quinn?
Thank you very much. My name is Paul Quinn. I live at 310 Little Falls Street. And my company, Quinn's Auction Galleries, occupies the building at 360 South Washington Street, which we purchased and occupied in October of 2 years ago. Last week, we completed the final work and settled on the property next to us, 350 South Washington Street, which has been vacant for a long time also. And we'll be using that building to accommodate the expansion of our auction house, at least on the ground floor in the immediate future. The other 2 floors of the building we intend to rent out as office, which is what it's currently zoned for, as we try to revitalize that area and accommodate our expansion. It's our company objective to continue to remain in the city of Falls Church. My wife and I have raised our family here and have lived here for many years. We hope to be a family business that will endure for at least one more generation. With the purchase of the 350 building, we now own the 2 buildings there that are adjacent to one another. The other building in that particular parcel is the Homestretch building, which was built back in, 30 years ago or something like that, when Burl Ehrlich was a developer here in the city. The business that we have now is bringing into the city several hundred people each week, and the city will benefit if there are other services in that part of town. We do auctions, we do them generally once a week. We do assessments. We are working with people who are downsizing, families who are liquidating personal and real property as our aging population, like myself, moves on through the process. I would like to commend the planning staff for this work. I think it's very tedious. 25 years ago, I sat on the Planning Commission, and some of the discussions that you have echo the same discussions we had then. We've changed the names of some of the streets, but the issues are so much similar. And I would encourage you to take note of the fact that I think the city's investment in these areas will facilitate development. I think it will bring developers, it will bring people. We would like, when this area does develop someday, we would like to have Quinn's Auction Galleries continue to be in this part of town. We would like to occupy about 30,000 square feet of space in some new development. The other thing I would encourage you to do is to make sure that we have parking. It doesn't have to be cheap parking. It doesn't have to be expensive parking. It needs to be adequate parking. People will come here for activities such as our auctions, and they will spend money doing other things. And I think the city has forever been short-sighted. We have tried to squeeze parking out of the development when it occurs, thinking that would be adequate. I've never known a project to meet the zoning requirements and be adequate for the reality of the business when it operates. Those two, we just can't seem to get them correct. But please be sensitive to that as you go forward. Again, I think this is a wonderful way to go. I think the city will be better by moving in this direction, and we will certainly, as Quinn's, are happy to be a part of it, proud to be a part of it, and will continue to work with the city as you go forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Quinn. Okay, we can move on now to Planning Commission comments on this, and then we'll see if we can't move towards a motion. Mr. Rankin, you want to start?
Sure, I thought it looks great, and I did think the updates were helpful. I hadn't seen this too much before, but the focus on interim steps that can be taken, because I think when we look at these plans, sometimes it's like 20, 30 years down the road, and it's hard to really get that excited about it. But I think listing out things that can happen in the interim is a great idea. I don't know exactly the process for funding any of those things to occur, but I think that approach in all these plans is a smart move, and we should keep that in mind.
I would mention, the CIP comes before the commission each year, and so one of the things we may want to look at is, as we do these area plans, what CIP projects are there either funded or ready for funding, should funding be available, that match up with the plans that you've gone and worked on and get adopted. So that, I think, is one way that we could work towards interim improvements.
Russ?
I also strongly support the plan that you put forward for us and that we've reviewed. I think that I agree this area is woefully inadequate, both from an appearance standpoint, but also from our ability to generate tax revenue. It has entirely too much surface parking, as you've correctly pointed out. And I am very supportive of not any, but be very open to any project that puts investment into this area. I think I agree with some of the speakers that with even small-scale investment, that you can really turn this area into something that will continue to grow. Not only is Pearson Square there, but with the new reserve that's being proposed and almost approved, that'll kickstart it along with some of the other renovations. I think this area has a lot of potential, the transit center. There's just a lot here that's really terrific. And the part I really did like, actually, was the isolation of the business corridor, or the CCA as it was called in the presentation, because it is one of those few areas that aren't bordering on residences. And we have such limited space where we can maximize that kind of development, where it's not in this small city bordering against the residents, that I think it's a good idea to continue to try to maximize it as best we can. So it's a very good plan, and that has my full support.
Melissa?
Well, I guess I'm just going to mirror you two, because I'm very, very happy with the plan and all the work we've done with it. And what I especially like about this area plan process is all the public meetings. When we have the big public meetings with everyone comes in and we do the different tables, the density and you know, the land use. And one of the things I think about this area plan is that we're adjusting the land use properly, because I think that we don't get the development we want because we have, the way the land uses were set up in the past really aren't appropriate. And I think by redoing it and having the business corridor and adjusting where we're gonna allow mixed use, I think it'll make a really strong difference in the future. But, you know, I agree with our speakers tonight. The biggest problem with the city is not making beautiful plans. We've made many, many lovely plans in the past, but we have always fell down when it came to public investment. And we make these great plans, and then they all involve some type of public investment. And when we get to that point where we need to do the investment, the council, the different councils all through time have always stepped back and said, no, we can't spend that money right now. So I think that it's a great plan. I hope that we, the Planning Commission, can use our influence, use the CIP to try to get some of the public investment we need here. Luckily, we do have some dollars coming with the transit center and some other, you know, we have some projects coming in that are gonna do some of that landscape and changes that we need done. But I think that's the big thing is, you know, this is a great plan, but we have to really make it happen.
So on the CIP, I mean, that sounds great, but we still don't have a traffic light on Pennsylvania and Broad.
There's news on that.
Yeah, when the traffic light on Pennsylvania and Broad goes in, that it will be.
Did get bids on that, I was told today, and it will be going out for bid. So this time next year, hopefully it will be finished. But the
This
bids
time
came
next-
in below our engineer's estimates.
You remember
which
that
is
from
good.
Saturday Night Live? President Franco is still dead. That's like the trap. So CIP. So I had a question. Item 5.11, you clarified the town center. Can you expand on that?
Yes, what there's been a trend to create these collections of retail and other uses in a compact, walkable form, and I guess The one I'm most familiar with, because I worked on it, was Market Common in Clarendon. And that was the old Sears lot, which had the auto center and a giant parking lot and a big building with a basement full of tires that later became Bread and Circus, now Whole Foods, and the Market Common shopping area with retail, housing, parking underneath, and in garages that borders a neighborhood. But it was a large site. In looking at this area, the area that is defined as a town center between the property owned by the church and then the adjoining shopping center and 2 or 3 other small parcels, it's big enough where you could do something like that. So it just seemed like that kind of use, moderate density, moderate height, next to neighborhoods, but still well located off Hillwood, Washington, and Fairfax, was a perfect place for something like that to happen. So by saying this is where a town center could happen, the investment community, the development community understands these kinds of things, and we're just trying to point out that this is what we'd like to see as a coordinated master plan kind of development there.
So just hypothetically, and really going to the other area plans that are on the horizon, in 2.2 square miles, how many of these town centers would you envision?
Well, that's a little bit hard to say, but for example, at the East End, where the Eden Center is presently, it's a very large site, 16-plus acres, well located, a minute from the East Falls Church Metro Station. I think ultimately an internationally themed town center approach there on a large parcel could work very well. That's an example of another site that's of size and located well enough that it could evolve into something like that. So that's the other one that particularly comes to mind. Depending on what happens with the referendum and the boundary adjustment, the 12 acres that's being talked about, 10 to 12 acres that could be commercially developed on the property that may come to the city, along with the West End Shopping Center, conceivably something of that nature could happen in that area as well. Those are maybe the 3 examples I can think of.
And so when you had it as those areas essentially is, part of the reason I'm asking is really foreshadowing the city center, because I think a lot of people envision this more going into what we're calling the city center. So you've sort of taken a different turn on this.
Well, I think, for example, as we are showing in this area plan, looking ahead at city center plan, which we also want to complete this calendar year, and we'll be coming back to you with recommendations. There had been a lot of talk about redeveloping that one area where a lot of the older, established, popular businesses are. And I think, Garrison, you've gone through, there's half a dozen plans that we've just, historical plans. We just felt that that is an area that needs to develop more organically, and we need to let individual businesses expand as possible rather than being there under the threat of redevelopment. That would be a very nice complement to more dense development in the core commercial area. And if any of you went to the Dogwood Tavern over the weekend and saw their new deck with the area underneath, that's what can happen when you can get rid of 3 or 4 parking places and let somebody do something creative. It's really nice. If you haven't been there, you should check it out. So these kinds of things done by small businesses where we can give up a few parking places. And I did fail to mention that Rick Goff mentioned we've got an arrangement that's going forward, we believe, with Kaiser to use their garage on a 6-month basis, that we can have parking in one place that you can park and walk to other businesses, thereby reducing the necessity of everybody have their own lot that they patrol and tow on. We could have a more cooperative commercial area than we have. And this isn't unique to this area of Falls Church. This happens in a lot of areas where you have small parcels and limited parking. So we're thinking of that area as more of the historic downtown area. A town center kind of implies a more newly created form, if you will, on a large site where you're trying to create something where there presently isn't something. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but
No, I got it.
Lindy?
Good, I'm glad you got it.
I really think this is one of the most transformational plans we've done. And I think it's so important because we've done the North Washington Street, which has a lot of great ideas of the areas up there. But this one is one of the most needy sections in the whole place. And it's it's going to be such a unique area to the whole city. And I also think all the historical aspects are extremely important, and the cultural aspects also that we're continuing. I am very, very pleased that we have 2 residents of the city who own businesses here and are really, really working at investing in the City of Falls Church. And what they've done has been really great for the businesses, and everything they've brought forward has always been really good. I do think we need to work at continue that landscape down to the reserve. And I see it's very necessary to do things like that, because the projects could have so much interacting with it, that now if there's all the action going on at reserve, doing the other things up the other end would be much more sensible to do at this time. And there's a space there, and it's cruddy looking, and this could be, really, really good. But I also think back to what Melissa said, that I'm very glad that there's been so much community involved in this. Not only these 2 business people, but in every single meeting we've had businesses that are located down there involved and very excited about it. And certainly with that one cultural aspect meeting that we had at Tax Analysts. But we've got, the Pearson Square Tax Analysts, we're getting the reserve at Tinner Hill, and all that is going to be worked into this plan that is just going to, I think it's going to be absolutely stunning and great uses. And I really think that the city needs to make investments. We really haven't done the kind of investments we should be doing, and infrastructure, and actually, if you're going to do something down there, get it all done. So it coordinates from the corner of Annandale and Washington down to where the reserve is. And I know it's going to be somewhat different streetscape because the reserve, we're doing something differently. But I think it's essential. But I think this is absolutely so important, and it's one of the most important things we've done so far.
Thank you, Lindy. Could you expand just a little bit on the paragraph, once adopted, the existing language in the comp plan would be superseded by the South Washington Area Plan, so that we can explain exactly how this is going to fit into our older plan and update it?
Presently, we have in that chapter a description of the South Washington Street area, which has been helpful, and some of it's incorporated into this plan. But it goes into more detail. So this would become the guide for that area rather than the brief description that's presently in the comp plan. And we will be coming back with possibly formal changes to land use and zoning and things like that as this moves forward. Because presently, if you go into the land use and economic development chapter, you'll find a description of each opportunity area.
Okay, and I do have a question that relates to Mr. Young's comments, and that is about the rolling road, or the to Rolling Road, or Fairfax Street as it's called. Is that, I'm unfamiliar with the idea to put a vault underneath it. Can you get into that just a little bit?
In talking to the engineering staff, there are a number of problems, as you know, with stormwater detention.
Right.
And so you need places where you can put a lot of water in a structure. Because of its length, and it's downhill from part of the city, but not all the way to Trips Run, this is an area where you have a lot of length where you could put a very large structure in that would hold stormwater, and could be released more slowly down to Trips Run. And then if that excavation and construction were completed, what Mr. Young is suggesting, and we're suggesting in some of these sketches, is that the restoration of it, including there's a very large overhead telecommunications wire that some of you might have seen. This could become a delightful street that could be very useful for events, a midweek farmers market, an art show. You know, a lot of things could happen there that are convenient to other places because you don't have to drive on it. There's access to some of the adjoining properties, but those cars are going to be going slow, and it's not a through street.
Right.
We think it's just presently it's on the bicycle plan, so it could be just an attractive, useful, small-scale street where you could combine history, some room for events, the functionality of a stormwater system, and just a pleasant pedestrian and bicycle environment.
And the plan for the stormwater system would be really buried. I mean, you wouldn't know it was there. You could do something on top of it so that it wouldn't.
That's the idea, and I know it hasn't been completely engineered, but in talking with Jason Widstrom and Cindy Mester, that is one of the places where they feel there's a lot of potential to have a significant impact on downstream flow because of the size of that area. So that'll take a big investment, but I think if on top of that we invest in what's it all going to look like, how can the public use it, I think we could have a very positive layering of important streetscape and public space on top of a very important infrastructure piece. So I think when we can combine those functions, that becomes a really good city investment. We should look for more ways to do that, more places to do that.
I agree. And do you feel that there's enough emphasis on doing something like that in the plan that we have now? I hadn't focused on that before tonight.
Well, as we've been going around and talking to people, it's become we've become more aware of the potential for it. And so some of our edits have included that, including some of the drawings. We also, working with the two office buildings that are north of that, we're getting easements from them that will allow us, if we have the funds, to do improved streetscape on all sides of that project, including the Fairfax Street side. And of course, if you actually spend any time down there and you walk it and look at it, particularly since some of the fences have come down, you really see the need for investment because it has been really neglected. So the combination of present condition and its potential is one that we think we should work to identify a project that could perhaps go in future CIP and then see if we can find a way to fund it.
Well, I was just thinking that since those two buildings are being updated and Mr. Young's property is being updated, and the stormwater improvements probably won't be going in for a while, even if it were just cleaned up, it would make a big difference.
That's true. I have heard that I think there's interest in trying to do the stormwater project perhaps next year sometime, maybe in the spring, depending on how quickly things can be designed. So as we look at CIP this fall, I think it'd be important to look and see whether there is a way to do something there.
Yeah, even a cleanup in green space there, even plantings. I mean,
Absolutely.
We don't have to do anything formal. Okay.
But certainly your support for the public improvements, the interim improvements, I think we do think that will have a very positive impact on investment. And when we've talked to people who are renovating buildings, they are very supportive of and are very willing to cooperate with the city in terms of giving us easements and permissions. And sometimes, as you may know, that's often the thing that can drag out the most in trying to get public improvements. We've found that there's a real willingness on the business community to give us easements we need if they believe that the public improvements will follow.
Thank you. My other comment is, it came from the Falls Church Chamber of Commerce, and they were talking about permeable sidewalks. Is that incorporated into this at all?
Not specifically. I mean, I think it's a very good idea. I don't know exactly how it fits with our streetscape standards. certainly something like Fairfax Street where you'd have a lot of area, maybe we ought to be looking at some of the parking areas, which actually have more square footage, might be a more appropriate place to try to get permeability.
Well, I can understand not in our streetscape, but there are a lot of side streets involved here. So I was just impressed with that comment and think we might want to incorporate,
That might be, for example, a feature you could build into something like Fairfax Street, whatever final paving is put there could be, that would be a lot of area, for example.
at least give the option to
Yes.
the builders. All right, if there are no further,
Ed, I think it'd be really great to work on the Fairfax Street because it would add to our open space down in that area. And there's always necessary need for that. And particularly, again, just think about the business owners' interest in it and their willingness to, in some ways, invest in it,
right.
you know, and that's really exciting, really exciting.
Well, we obviously are all very supportive of all the wonderful work you all have done, and I think we should get a motion now on this so that we can move it on to City Council.
Okay. I move that the Planning Commission recommend that the City Council adopt the South Washington Street Corridor Small Area Plan.
I'll second it.
Ms. G, would you call the roll, please?
Absolutely, yes.
Mr. Meeks?
Yes.
Mr. Rankin?
Yes.
Ms. Rogers?
Yes.
Ms. Teets?
Yes.
Mr. Wodisca?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank
Awesome.
you for your comments, Mr. Young and Mr. Quinn, and we will send this on to to the City Council, and I know they've had a lot of opportunities to look at it as well, so hopeful that they'll move on it in a positive way. We'll now move on to item B, the ordinance to vacate a portion of the City of Falls Church public street right-of-way in the 300 block of West Broad.
Gary Fuller is going to give the
Okay.
presentation on that.
Good evening, Gary Fuller, City Planning staff. This ordinance that's before you tonight is a very minor vacation of the public street right-of-way that is located in 300 block of West Broad Street. It's associated with the planned development at 301 West Broad Street, which is the Rushmark project. It involves just 71 square feet.
Did
What
you
it
say
would do-
71?
71.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a very small portion of property. And in effect, it's a sale of land by vacating the public street. And so it would convey to the property owner at 301 West Broad Street. Now, the purpose of this minor adjustment is really to solidify the sort of a constant building face along the frontage of the planned project where the first floor retail and the Harris Teeter store will be. And rather than having a minor little step back of a couple feet, you could have a uniform front at the 20-foot setback. So the purpose of it is really just to have that uniform setback at 20 feet from the face of curb for the new building. And that's basically it. The City Council is scheduled to hear this in a week on October 15th. We had originally had this parallel to the site plan approval that you have under review for the Rushmark project. That's a little behind schedule with their resubmission, so we're looking at a November approval date for that. So anyway, so this was originally trying to be time to, get approved along the same time as that. But anyway, it's before you tonight. The staff is recommending that the Planning Commission recommend the council approval of the ordinance, which is TO 13-23. I'll be happy to take any questions if anybody has any. Thank you.
Yes, Rob.
Is there any downside to doing this now before the site plan?
It's been advertised. It could always be continued to a future date. We would have to re-advertise for the city council, so there's some funds that were expended already to do the
So-
proper notice.
If we,
Other than that, no.
if we give up the 71 feet, are we losing some kind of leverage or some kind of something at some point in the?
Not at all. Matter of fact, we're actually netting, well, we're getting 2,910 square feet back from the project. They're actually going to purchase a property from us, and then from the EDA. They're going to give us streetscape back and a dedication on both the Broad Street side and the Annandale side. That'll net almost 3,000 square feet back to us at no cost.
Okay.
The fact that we're transferring this in terms of a conveyance, 71 square feet, I think it's a pretty good deal. So,
And is this just, this is just a piece of street, right?
it's just a piece of street.
Okay.
And it's, it's about 2 feet wide on one end, it's about 6 inches, 50 feet later. It's just this little strip. It just evens up what they're trying to do on the building front.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
I move that the Planning Commission recommend that the City Council adopt TO 13-23, an ordinance to vacate a portion of the city's public street right-of-way in the 300 block of West Broad Street and convey to the 301 West Broad Street Limited Partnership adjacent property owner at 301 West Broad Street Real Estate Assessment Parcel 52-309-11 as requested by Rushmark Properties LLC.
Is there-
I'll second it.
Are there, okay, now, we have to have some comments. Are there any comments?
Oh,
It seems like a very reasonable request, and it sounds like we're getting more land back than we are given, so that's always nice.
Russ?
This motion has my full support.
I'm glad to hear that.
Can we make sure it gets on the tax rolls, the extra 71 square feet, taxable land?
Ms. G, would you please call the roll?
It will.
It's been moved and seconded, and I'd like you to call the roll, if you would, please.
Mr. Meeks?
Yes.
Mr. Rankin?
Yes.
Ms. Rogers?
Yes.
Ms. Teets?
Yes.
Mr. Wodisca?
Yes.
Ms. Hockenberry?
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to C, under new business, TO 13-21, the ordinance to amend Chapter 48 zoning to remove assisted living as a by right use in the B1 limited business zoning. We have to do a recommendation to City Council. This is something that we recommended that they take up, and so I guess there have been some minor changes to our recommendation, but Mr. Snyder,
Recommend you go forward with this to remove assisted living as a by right use. It would be, become a conditional use, and we think that's appropriate. These kinds of facilities do need a little additional scrutiny, if you will, and therefore it's appropriate, and we recommend it.
All right, are there any questions? Yes.
Does this affect the plan that's gone in? Kensington?
Not really, in that they had come through as a special exception because
Right.
of height and parking. And so they were not proposing a by right use, at least formally. This would make it, there would be another layer, if you will. There'd be the conditional use of, is this an appropriate use? And then the special exception, which they've also filed for already, the height and parking, so.
In addition
No
to that,
major effect,
yeah,
if
in
you will.
addition to that, do you think that with looking at this particular use, do you think we should go through the B1, B2, B3, and transitions to look at the uses?
Well, I think, we have a list of zoning ordinance amendments we're trying to work through, and for example, we've done a lot of work on the Greenway Downs area, so there are ones we've got queued up I'd like to get done. Certainly, it would be useful, particularly after we get through with some of the area plans, to take a look at the B zones and tweak them somewhat in light of how they interact with the small area plans. But I think at this point, this is an appropriate change, and we should do that at this time and look at those other items at a later date when we can look more
Yeah,
comprehensively.
because we've gotten to certain situations where we end up fighting about dentist's office and, you know, and, you know, a few other banks. You know, we've had hoorahs over banks. And, you know, just really trying to clean them up because they're very ancient. The uses, some of them are not even in existence anymore. And certainly, you know, it's silly.
Would you do the recommendation?
Will I do that one?
Yes, please.
I would be happy to,
Okay,
if I can find it.
I just wanted,
Andy has a comment first.
can I say a couple things real quick? Yeah, I agree, we should review them when we have a chance. Things like, I don't know, mortuaries seem to fall in the same category of reasons why we don't want assisted living. And I do think we should be crystal clear. I mean, I know that the current proposal is a special exception, but if that falls through and they come back and want to do a by right thing, I just think we should just make sure it's clear. I don't even necessarily care too much which way it goes. If they would be able to submit something down the road with the old rules or the new rules, or I just don't want there to be.
It would be a conditional use.
So they would be
Could be
impacted
affected by this
Okay.
if they wanted to do it by right.
But yeah, otherwise, if we can't yank mortuaries right now, then I guess go with this and clean up the rest later.
It's really, the whole list is crazy.
Yeah, it's really a question of
Next.
work capacity and then working on the most important things. It's not unimportant. I think some of the suggestions maybe EDA are worthy, but we need time to work on those. We're trying to get the plans done and key zoning ordinance amendments. There's also the second story issue that we've talked about, two stories as a minimum.
So I had a very quick question about this, and you can give me the Reader's Digest answer. I have not understood, it's fiscal impact, no direct fiscal impact, but part of the challenge with this is Sunrise, for example, does not pay taxes in the normal way. Can you just sort of quickly expand on assisted living and its taxability or untaxability?
I'd really rather not try to do that tonight because this is a zoning piece, but I will say that the city council is, we heard last week, is planning on the 21st to do a work session and allow the Kensington project to come forward and present to city council. And I believe the planning commission will be invited to attend that. At that point, you will get more of a detailed analysis and explanation of the fiscal aspects of these things. I'm not myself prepared to do that tonight, but on the 21st, we should be able to get a much more detailed piece looking at that specific project. Of course, this is not specific to that. This is more of a text change. And economic development staff has been working on that issue. And I believe the applicant in that case has a specific proposal that he may be presenting to council to address that issue. But,
Got it.
yeah. So stay tuned for the 21st.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that the planning commission recommend that the city council give first reading to this, or no, sorry, that the city council give first reading to this ordinance and refer it to the appointment boards and commissions for comment.
But we want the top part read too.
Oh, go ahead, take over from me, I defer.
That's what was going behind your back. We recommend the ordinance to amend Chapter 48 zoning to remove assisted living as a by right use in the B1 limited business zoning district and require conditional use permit be approved by City Council T013-21.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the planning commission recommend T013-31 be approved by city council. All those in, I'm sorry.
Just to be a stickler, Mr. Meeks, would you withdraw your motion?
Yes.
Yes, withdrawn.
Thank you, Ms. G. Would you please call the roll?
Mr. Rankin?
Yes.
Ms. Rogers?
Yes.
Ms. Teets?
Yes.
Mr. Wodisca?
Yes.
Ms. Hockenberry?
Yes.
Mr. Meeks?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, you did. Okay. All right.
having too much fun.
We're moving on to Section D of new business.
Okay.
That is ordinance TO 13-22 to amend Chapter 48 zoning to require a 20-foot front yard setback for commercially zoned properties on Broad and Washington Streets. And what we need is a recommendation to the city council. And I think Mr. Wadiska is going to do that recommendation.
And I do have a small comment.
Yes, we would like to comment, actually.
I had questions on this.
This is something the commission has been talking about for quite some time, and the time seems right to have the 20-foot front yard setback, particularly on Washington and Broad Streets, our main thoroughfares. So we support that, and we have been getting that typically with new developments. This would mean that any by right project would have to meet that standard. There has been also talk about applying this to other streets, which may be a good idea, but we would need to really look at that, find out what's the appropriate amount. I think it's premature to do it at this time. The one thing I would say is that the only relief under the code as drafted in this ordinance would be through the BZA, Board of Zoning Appeals. And it may be that the commission and council would like to reserve any flexibility in terms of relief for themselves rather than through the BZA as a part of a site plan and special exception, where as part of a review of a specific project and knowing the full design and implications of it, you would have the authority to provide that flexibility in that context. Otherwise, any relief would be to the BZA only. I think if you reserve that right for the commission and the council, then that would be the authority by which such relief would be given, and it could not go to the BZA. So at any rate, that's something to think about.
That's
Hard
not in
lines
here,
are-
though.
That's not in here,
Okay.
but it's, and it may not be something you want to do. But if you want flexibility, if you think that makes sense, something to think about. Also, I would note that there's some excellent graphics that are here, looking at streetscapes around the city that Mr. Gary Fuller put together, and I think they're really instructive in terms of letting us see specifically various parts of the city and how streetscape and building facades interact with our main thoroughfares. So I appreciate his work on that, and I think this kind of real-world, pictures of what's out there, I think are very helpful. So, Gary, I wanted to thank you for that effort.
Andy?
Yeah, just to clarify that point you made, so if we do this the way it's written, if somebody wanted to come in and do a smaller sidewalk, they couldn't do that through special exception, it'd have to go through BZA?
They'd have to prove a hardship at the BZA. You wouldn't have the authority to give them any flexibility. So that is a question. I mean, hard lines can be hard lines, but sometimes you may want flexibility. So it's something for the council and the commission to think about.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I know this came up at the EDA meeting, but I think it would be cool to have the 20-foot standard be not just for Broad Street and Washington, but probably for everything in the B1 zone, but only if we could then allow adjustments through special exceptions. So basically flip for what we have right now. Right now, when we're negotiating special exception, we're asking for this wider sidewalk, and that's one of the things that they'll give us. And if it were the other way around, if they were asking for, hey, can we have a 16-foot sidewalk, then, you would flip the negotiation. So I think we definitely want to do that special exception thing, and I would encourage us to look at expanding it to almost, pretty much just to make it easy. If you can undo a special exception, anything in the B1 zone, then it's sort of it seems like a better standard for us to work from.
Right,
Well,
right.
if we were to put something like that into this motion, it would make it different. I mean, it would amend it so that it would have to go back to first reading. I mean, I think
it would not have to go back to first reading. My understanding is that the commission can recommend changes. Presently, you have a 14-foot standard. So this is between that, and this would provide more flexibility between what's been advertised and what's presently the standard. So I think that would be within the scope of notice.
I would just add Gary Fuller for the record. It would have a lesser impact, in other words, you have more impact now with the current. And I know you're talking about special exceptions, but this is really, you have an effect at the by right site plans.
Right.
So, you have no relief for that right now if, they have to go to the 20-foot mark in terms of the building setback. And the waiver provisions you have, like for the commercial entrances within 100 feet of residential
Right,
area,
right.
you can waive the requirements for landscaping buffers, and I think some waiver provision built into this would be appropriate for your authority and for those routine site plans and things that you would see that are not in the special exception round where everything's negotiable. You're dealing with by right things. So I think some relief there through a waiver process, similar to what you have now, would be appropriate. So my thoughts on it.
But that would require us to change the motion, is that?
Well, it could be if you think that that's something could be incorporated into the code, we could bring that to council as craft
Separately
language.
or with this? Separately or with this particular motion?
With this as part of your recommendation or as a follow-up to your recommendation. We have talked a good bit about this. I mean, the intent is to try to get 20 feet, to have
Right.
20 feet. There may be instances where you think, well, gee, I'd like to have some flexibility. So it's not to say it's a toothless tiger or it's a standard without meaning, but sometimes you do want to provide flexibility when you see a specific design. So that's the intent here, not to say, oh, it isn't really 20 feet. It's to give you the tools and the council the tools to waive or vary it if you find that it's appropriate.
The only problem that I have with that is it seems to me that on those other situations, such as the buffers, and what was your other example, Gary? Oh, the entrance, yeah. I mean, they always come to us. Every single project comes to us for waivers on this. So what's the sense in deciding that we want 20-foot sidewalks if we're always going to be asked to waive them? It just seems to
Well,
me
and I
that
think
if we're
that's-
standing for 20-foot sidewalks, then we ought to stand for 20-foot sidewalks.
Well, I think it's important that you convey that this is the desired intent. It's not a standard without teeth. My only point was that under this, the BZA is the only other route, and it may be better for you and the council to reserve that power to yourselves as a part of an overall plan where you're looking at a wider variety of things. There could be a plan that has 24 feet in one area and 18 feet in another area, for example, that for a special plaza design or something else.
Well-
You never know.
That was my question.
Yes.
I can envision a lot of situations, and I think we sort of had this a little bit with, for example, the hotel, the Hilton Garden Inn, where you may have, for example, the average could be 20 feet because you bumped out part of the building and it was 16, and then you set back the other part. And so my concern, and I would be strongly opposed to this motion as it's written, if it's 20 feet hard and fast and that's it, you're done. Because I don't think it gives anybody any kind of flexibility. And
Right.
I can just envision so many circumstances where everybody involved would want at least some degree of flexibility, which historically we have not gotten from the BZA, and I see no reason that would be different. So I think we would need to modify this, at least as
Okay.
Well,
I'm fine with that. I just don't, I don't want it to be a given that we're going to be doing waivers all the time.
no.
And I think that's an important point for the commission to make. What I'm bringing up is just that you may want flexibility, but you're not saying, gee, don't pay any attention to the 20-foot setback. We want the 20-foot setback.
Yeah.
Right.
There may be instances where it makes sense to provide some relief
Right.
based on a specific plan, which might, for example, include averaging of setbacks.
Hey, just because I'm not as familiar with the waiver thing, so it sounds like there's, the way it's written now, if they wanted something other than 20, they'd have to go through the BZA. I was talking before about special exception, that's sort of like the extreme to the other side. You're saying there's like a middle ground with these waivers. and your concern is that then everybody asks for them, but I mean, we don't have to give them, right? I mean,
No, you wouldn't have to, it would be part of a special exception kind of process where you have discretion.
Yeah, I think I also have another problem with this, with not having flexibility, because if you are, in all of our overall planning, that all that strip of East Broad or West Broad up to around St. James and all those little lots up there, they're very shallow. And if you didn't have flexibility for different type of setback, they wouldn't be developable, I don't think, because they're very shallow, right next to
But tho-
residential.
those aren't, they're not zoned.
They would be
Yes, they are,
affected
are they?
because they're on
They are.
Washington Street and Broad Street.
All the
Anything on Washington or
small,
Broad.
No, I know
stores,
which ones you're
yeah.
talking about. I was just thinking that they would be zoned differently than the ones we're talking about, but
They're
apparently
mostly
not.
zone B1, I believe.
B1, yeah.
yeah.
Some B2.
And I think that would cause a real problem because some of them are so shallow anyway. And up in that area, the 14-foot would be acceptable, but I do think we need to have some flexibility built in there somewhere because.
But the 14,
otherwise-
would the 14-foot remain the same? I mean, would it still be minimum 14-foot?
No, we'd have 20 feet. It would just be variations from this.
Okay.
Would be something the planning commission and city council could consider as part of a special exception, for example. It would mean by right projects could not be less than 20 feet.
Right.
That would be wonderful.
Are there any restrictions on sidewalks that aren't on, if it's for the same property, that are not on Washington or Broad? So a side street, you can just have a 5-foot sidewalk?
Well,
or-
side streets typically are requiring a 14-foot setback on commercial properties, which is the same as it presently is required now in Washington Broad. I think the Flower Building is an example of one that is set back that short distance. People felt was too close.
right, which is why the hotel
Would be
is
better if
similar.
it was further back.
But on Lee,
Like on Oak and stuff, it would
but on
still
Lee
be
Street for the
14,
Flower
yeah,
Building,
14.
is that also 14 feet? I mean, the regulations are that would be 14 feet? I mean, so
I
it's-
believe on the side streets it is 14 feet. Gary, does that sound right? Yeah.
And that's not being, I mean, we're not changing that to
No,
20 at all?
again, there may be worthy to make changes to the other streets. At this point, we're looking primarily at Washington and Broad. And I think the EDA had said, gee, we should look at other streets as well. I think that takes more study, but it's not a bad idea. It just takes study.
By right.
And
Trying
more
to
study
avoid
like
unintended consequences.
I mean, Washington Broad are certainly the major corridors, but,
Right.
Even in the South Washington Street plan, we saw the CCA area. Those streets, if we're trying to make it, walkable and vibrant, I think, ultimately, I'm not saying in this particular motion, but I think those should also have 20-foot
Yeah,
sidewalks as
well, in
well.
places like West Jefferson and places that could redevelop where you'd want these 20-foot sidewalks. So I think we'd have to come back sometime and revisit other streets that would want.
Some of this too may also be involving narrowing some of these streets, which have overly wide lanes and encourage speeding. And where, ultimately figuring out what's the design of the street, where do you want the curb line?
That's a good point.
So just so I'm clear,
Yeah.
so this motion, as the title indicates, it says requires a 20-foot front yard setback. So if there is some need for, if an applicant wants to do something like what Mr. Meek said, where they have 16 at one and 24 at another, they just come first for a waiver and we can then grant it.
As
So-
it's
But we
written
have to
now, it
write-
would be
we have to
20
say
feet.
that.
Everybody have a 20-foot setback. If you wanted to provide flexibility, we would need to craft some additional language.
Okay, well,
If you think it's a good idea.
think
I
we
bring
all-
it up only because we've heard
I think
about
it's
this.
I think we're thinking that it's a good idea, and we need to craft.
Is it a
the
good idea if this is just related to by right buildings? I mean, if by right,
By right would still have 20 feet.
just have to, I'm saying, I don't know that needs flexibility, and if they want flexibility, they would have to come to us, right? I mean,
Well, but what we're saying is the way this is written,
They would have to go
the
to
only way they
BZA.
could get something different would be go to the BZA.
Yeah.
they couldn't come to us for a waiver or through special exception, right?
Well, our suggestion, if you want flexibility, and then you may want to reserve that for yourself in the city council through what Mr. Fuller has suggested, we can craft language at your direction, but the point is, we're really looking to get 20 feet. It's not,
Right.
gee, we
Right.
don't want 20 feet. We're trying to get 20
So
feet.
my
The ability to
understanding,
provide
though,
flexibility.
is that if we don't add language about a waiver that would go through the planning commission, then the BZA process will be the one that can be used.
Yes.
So regardless if we have the waiver or not, they'd be going through the BZA. So if we put a waiver in, then it allows it to be more of a planning discussion, a planning decision,
Decision, yeah.
rather than having it be a zoning decision, which is really what the BZA is looking at.
And the
And
BZA
hardship.
has some
We're looking
pretty,
at hardship issues.
they have some hardship issues, and they're not pushovers. It's,
Right.
but the question is, if you had a plan in front of you where there was a reason for flexibility, and you wanted to do it, you'd need a tool to be able to do it.
So what we really need to do is do a motion that recommends that the city council pass this resolution with the addition of language allowing for a waiver situation rather than a BZA solution to add flexibility.
And I think it should be linked to a special exception process
Right,
Okay.
right.
where you're
Right.
you're looking at the whole package.
So a waiver would only be available through a special exception. Otherwise, there would be no flexibility.
Well, except that Rob and I were just talking about certain small parcels on Broad Street down near the, down near the church.
Across from
And
St. James.
even if you put together a couple of parcels, they're not deep enough to have a 20-foot sidewalk. And they're certainly not going to be able to amass enough parcels to do a special exception there. So if they want to redevelop there and put something in by right, and they have to do a 20-foot sidewalk, won't be able to do it.
Yes, that was my concern about bringing that up, particularly that one side.
So I think we're just going to have to give a general option for a waiver. But it's not only a planning commission waiver, it would be a planning commission recommendation to the city council.
Right. And they'll have to consider whether they want to have that flexibility.
Right.
We can work on that with the attorney and the zoning administrator in terms of if the
Okay,
council's,
so our.
if the commission's interested in that.
Our motion would be then to recommend to city council that they approve the 20-foot front yard setbacks, and know that we are also recommending a waiver situation, or a waiver proposal that is going to be submitted by planning staff and city attorney to the city council at their next meeting.
We would try to develop the language based on your intent, which, again, is part of a special exception process, a plan that's coming in front of you for review. You and the council could provide that flexibility.
That didn't answer my question.
And we would work on language that we could present to council as an option.
As an option,
To this.
and you're going to present it when they consider our recommendation next week, or whatever
Yes,
it is. Yeah.
it could be presented as
Okay.
the planning commission's suggestion, here's language that could possibly implement that, if
Okay.
you choose to add it.
Okay.
I think we need that language and it would coordinate with the master plan and stuff like that for up along that one area.
Can we defer this until we have that language?
You could,
We have a meeting on October 21st, right?
I think, the other piece, I guess, could be that you could forward this on and perhaps bring up that part of the topic, or we could bring back language to you, draft language for you to look at. That might
Well,
be
but
one
we also could continue it until the 21st and then have the language and then pass it on, because they're not having their second reading until the 28th.
Gary, on advertising, how would we be? If it's continued?
It's been properly advertised for public hearing tonight, and you could continue it to your subsequent meeting, and that advertising would continue with that.
Good point. Done.
Does everybody feel comfortable with that?
Yes, absolutely.
I feel more comfortable with that.
Okay.
Would you just say that we're going to continue?
I make a motion that the Planning Commission continue the ordinance for TO 13-22 until our next meeting on October 21st, 2013.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Ms. G, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Rogers?
Yes.
Ms. Teets?
Yes.
Mr. Wodisca?
Yes.
Ms. Hockenberry?
Yes.
Mr. Meeks?
Yes.
Mr. Rankin?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimous.
Thank you. Our next, thank you, Rob. And Mr. Foley, thank you for all those great pictures. Actually, it was interesting to see them because we walk down those streets and you're not realizing how big the sidewalks are. Sometimes you don't notice that they're smaller than 20 feet, and other times you think that they really are only 10 feet or 6 feet or something like that. And I think a lot of it has to do with, you know, what's out there and how many sandwich signs are in the middle of the sidewalk and things like that. So it was really helpful to see those. Okay, we'll move on to E, Section E in new business, the Mobile Food Service Unit Study Group. Comments to City Council.
I think we had a presentation at one of our earlier meetings from Nancy Vincent, who is chairing that group. You have a report in front of you with suggested changes. They're looking to continue to get comments on the code. Kind of throw it open to the commission as to what your thoughts are, having heard her presentation, and you may have had feedback as well from others on this topic.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Just to be clear, because when I think about mobile food service, I'm thinking about carts on the sidewalk that I can walk up to, and it sounds like we're still not going to allow that to happen. They're not going to be allowed to use public right-of-way, so that means they could not be parked at a curb. Is that correct?
I believe so, and this would need to be, I believe, on private property.
Yeah, so
Right.
I kind of question that, because when I first heard we were looking at this, I thought the end result was going to allow us to have some of those mobile food, carts at a curb. It seems kind of funny, we're going to all this trouble to rewrite the law, but basically it's just so they could find some property to park it on. So, I don't know.
Be licensed
And
under
be
us.
licensed, right.
Well,
I
they
mean-
would have to be licensed no matter what.
Right, I mean, that, I'm not talking about the license, I just thought it was interesting that we're not gonna allow that. I mean, I know in Arlington, and of course in DC, they allow that, but my understanding is that we are following some of the rules that Fairfax County put together, and I guess Fairfax County is not allowing public right-of-way use. Is that correct? Or do we know?
I believe so, although there are examples of, some of these have been operating occasionally on public streets.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any problems with any of the, terminology changes here or the licensing requirements or anything like that. And I mean, I wouldn't have any trouble going forward what we have. I guess I'm just kind of, feel like it's just not that much of a change than what we have right now.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that.
I agree with you, very much so, but I think at this point, let's get something going. And then this can be revised, because we would get a chance to see how it's used and how many people might want to use it, and then go forward with something else. Because I think Fairfax County regulations are still so suburban, it's ridiculous. And, we're definitely leaning more to the urban concept. But I think that if we get it going and then see what's coming out of it, then it could be recommended for other types of spaces.
Well, I don't disagree with that. I just think that this change, while it at least puts in motion the processes and application and license to do the mobile, I mean, we're talking about basically more the kind of things you do for, you know, occasionally in the business parking lot as part of like a festival or something like that. It seems more aligned with that than it does what I consider to be food trucks, you know, so.
Or carts.
Or carts, yeah.
And it wouldn't be part of any of the, like Taste of Falls Church or
No.
like the Tinner Hill Festival. That wouldn't have any,
No.
because I made sure about that.
Russ?
Yeah, I guess I would just follow on. I'm not sure I understand what the problem is with using public right-of-way. I mean, it seems so restrictive. Again, sort of thinking back to the DC experience, and I work in Silver Spring, and the food trucks pull up the side of the road all the time and get a quick meal, and they're gone 3 hours later, and it's a non-event. But I mean, they got to park in a space where they can service customers, and it doesn't block traffic. And it seems to me there's a few of those spots in the city, and this seems like a really important part of this ordinance, that it not be on public property, and I'm just not sure I understand what we're trying to prevent here.
Well, I think if the commission feels that way, I think you should go ahead and convey some of that feeling to council. We were at Parks and Recreation last week, and there was some discussion about this, and there was some mention about some of the situations in the district where you may have a whole street full of this going on, which could be problematic. So one of the issues might be how many on a particular stretch of street at any one time.
Yeah, I mean, that
example.
actually seems somewhat reasonable, unless it was, you know, a stretch of land where you'd have, or a stretch of street where you had 4 or 5 trucks, which would give you some choice. But it seemed to me that it was based on, from the presentation that we heard, that it was from the brick and mortar type businesses that were worried about
Right, right.
them
think they're
losing
having-
their business because someone parked right in front of it, which I think is legitimate. But to have no public spots, to me, it seems unnecessarily restrictive. That's just my opinion, though. I know they've gone through a process to talk to with a board and opinions.
Do you have a sense of what instigated this?
There was a vendor who came to city
resident.
council and requested more flexibility to provide this service here in the city. And I guess she was trying to get a permit to operate and ran into this not being legal here in the city.
Right, right. A city resident, too.
I believe that's it.
And then there were some illegal, you know, there were some that were doing it illegally, actually, you know, on public right away.
Well, for example, on Gordon Road last week, I know there's a truck that provides food for workers in some of the automotive areas there.
Right, and I think there's another concern with the,
For people who have a short lunch
development.
break, aren't going to drive to lunch and can
So
get
what?
quick food.
Yeah, great. So, that sounds good.
Yeah.
I,
So what are we being asked to?
Being asked for
Send a
comments,
comment
for
to
comments.
Nancy or to the
council.
Well,
council, or
it,
who?
the council, through this effort, is looking for comments before something gets advertised and moves forward towards adoption. Ultimately, you'd have to have a public hearing on it, so if you have thoughts, now's the time to pass those on.
Okay.
And it's not to say endorse this as is, but what do you think of this? Are there comments you have, or changes, or additional advice for council?
I would think like, it's good that we're adding this flexibility that someone can license a food truck or a mobile food service, as we're calling it, the terminology here. So I think that these changes are great. I guess my comment would be, I'd like to see us to take another step and allow some use of the public right-of-way under specific types of license. And I know in DC, they do have basically like quotas, like how many can be in certain areas of the city. And so maybe we could even say there's certain streets that we wouldn't allow it on, like, you know, obviously not Broad Street, which doesn't really have the parking for it anyway, or Washington. We could say some streets you could use, you know, maybe we could limit that use of public right-of-way. There are parts of the city that don't have a lot of food options, so this might be useful in.
You certainly don't want a wall of large vehicles.
I'm not sure there's a big risk of that, but I have two questions. One,
Some limited amount
how
might be appropriate,
can
it
they,
might be tolerable.
would this limit them from parking on, in like the parking lot of a city park or something? It's not a street, but it's not a private. Is that public right away? So that was the question. And then, would this affect the ice cream man? Because that would be a big bummer. I mean, he's not cooking anything. He's just chucking frozen treats.
Well, I know there was one at, over the week, a couple of weekends ago at Larry Graves Park, where there was a big crowd. So, you know, if you have specifics like that you want to make sure, pass that along.
Okay, so do we need to do a memo? Or,
Well, I think if you can provide a motion of support with caveats, or things you'd like to see changed or added, that would be helpful.
I would say I was sort of joking about the ice cream man, but one of the things that's not clear to me is right now the ice cream truck, he shows up at Larry Graves Park and he sells some ice cream at the end of soccer practice, whatever.
Right.
If this would actually make it prohibitive for him to like pay for all the licensing and get all the approval, that would be a bummer. I wouldn't support that. So I don't know what the cost of actually, adhering to this would be for an existing business, but I'd love more information about that.
What I'm hearing the commission say is that you like having something like this, but you'd like a little more flexibility to provide some limited amount of use of the public right-of-way, and that the ability to have specific things like ice cream trucks at sporting events on parking lots,
how
something
about
you'd
the
want to
good-
make sure was
The
not
Good Humor
restricted.
Man, can he go around through the neighborhoods and sell ice cream?
Well, that's what I'm wondering, because they're not creating food in the truck, so it seems like a different situation than cooking up tacos or something.
Well, I think if you could express those concerns and the things you'd like to make sure can be done, in addition to what's written here, we can pass that on.
And then my general sentiment is, to me, I would suggest putting something fairly loose in here so that the people that want to operate can operate without worrying what the deal is. And if it becomes a massive problem, we can revisit it and tighten it up. We might be spending a lot of time worrying about something that's not really ever going to be an issue.
I guess the big deal is right now, you technically can't operate a food truck.
Yeah, exactly. So
at
I'd love
least-
to get something in place so they can, so
So
they're
that's
not
good that we're
fearing
step
getting in
forward
trouble.
one,
But
we
let's not
can
worry
operate
too
a
much
food
about
truck.
having wall-to-wall food trucks that are putting brick and mortar shops out of business until that.
Yeah, I think we need more density before we can expect that, more office.
Well, some of the industrial areas, for example, don't have a lot of restaurants, that kind of thing.
And then they're talking, of course, about with the two big developments coming in, having,
Where construction is taking
Right,
place.
right.
Yeah.
right.
And I think
Okay,
that's
so
no
I think the consensus is we support it, but we would like to be
Flexible.
a little bit more flexible, and I'll be happy to draft something or look at something that
Okay.
is drafted. But I don't think we have to do a motion.
So I think you're looking for some limited use of the public right-of-way, making sure that convenient food, ice cream, et cetera, at sporting events, public parks is not restricted or prohibited, and that the Good Humor Man be able to be in the city without being a scofflaw,
Yes.
and that some limited streets, not determined, but at this point, could be appropriate for this kind of use.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes, thank you.
the ice cream man, a Good Humor truck, to me seems like a little bit of an anomaly, but I don't want to see food trucks in residential streets. I mean, I think,
No.
Again, the guy driving around throwing out ice cream cones, it seems to be okay, but beyond that, I would not like to see these parked in the residential areas.
Right.
And I like the licensing. I mean, some of this seems pretty heavy-handed, but I'm not experienced in terms of how prohibitive these are. But I do like the concept, that part of it. I really do like that they need to display a sticker and have gone through the proper licensing so that it's not only safe for the residents, but does not unfairly hurt the brick-and-mortar stores.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if you wanted to draft a memo, you could send that to me, and I would
Okay.
distribute it to the Planning Commission with a reminder to use the reply and not the reply all to avoid the electronic meeting.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. And do we have a deadline as to when we have to get this in?
I believe ASAP, does the 8th of October ring a bell, Deborah? I think I saw something
That's tomorrow.
I recognize.
Well, I think I'm not going to draft anything because I'm not going to have time because I can't. do
But
that.
certainly, given the commission's meeting tonight, I think we can get a little more time for you.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to move from other business, since we have none, to approval of the minutes. Has everyone had time to read the minutes?
Just stray from this just for a minute about other business and have the report of the traffic light.
Oh, yes, please.
Yes, our city engineer, Kirsten Muntz, did indicate that there was a bid opening, and I believe Fort Meyer Construction, if my recollection is correct, won the bid opening. They're a company that's done work for us before. The costs of the traffic light at Penn and Broad came in under the engineer's estimate.
Good.
There are, the special light poles and traffic poles that we use have to be cast. There's some lead time for that, but there's work that can be done. So we would hope that we would be complete and operational a year from now.
Oh,
Hopefully sooner than that.
no,
But I think I'm pretty safe in saying it can move forward.
that's not good enough a year from now. These kids
Well,
are
I'm being very
graduating from high
conservative.
school.
Those are not her words, but I'm saying finished, completed, done.
Yeah, but, you know, this
Operational.
is a project that the seventh grade when the seniors that are now there started in the seventh grade.
And I'm not the perfect person to say how long it will take, but it can move forward. There is a bid opening. We have a contractor. That is good news, and
Well,
it's less
anything
than
that
we
can
thought.
be done to move it along, right, Russ?
Yeah, I actually happen to know Fort Meyer Construction quite well in my professional life, and they can move on it much faster than a year.
Like I said, I'm being very conservative. This time next year, we should have an operational
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
But
signal that we've been using for a while.
thank you. Has everyone read the minutes?
I did actually inspire me to ask a follow-up question
Good.
based on my comment last time, which was, and you mentioned it briefly in your report. So the historic building that was taken down, and you mentioned there was a settlement. For when my friends ask me, like, hey, they tore down the historic building, what was the settlement? Did they pay a penalty? Is there the developer, are they just,
There was
just
a,
got
there
by
is,
with it, or what's the?
well, there is a small penalty. There is going to be a $2,000 contribution to the historic program in the city. They are going to build back the building with, I think, higher grade of materials standards that were specified by HARB. Hopefully that will begin in the near future. And we also have instituted a number of administrative requirements internally that I can go into more detail with you at some point, but some of these have to do with our MUNIS system, and Deborah G. having final authority to sign off on any permitting, and looking for owners to sign an affidavit saying they understand that when they get a permit, that the intent is not to tear the building down, but to preserve as much of it as possible. And we'll be having zoning inspectors monitoring these on a regular basis, so that if anything untoward is going on, we can deal with it quickly and efficiently.
If I could add to that, the Historical Commission and the HARB met on that application not last Thursday, I think it was the 26th of September. And the general contractor for the project mentioned that although they had filled up 20 or more dumpsters with materials from the house, unbeknownst to us, the contractor said that they are in storage right now, and they intend to reuse many of those elements.
Well, That's
That would be
actually very
nice.
good news. I was not at the, the September 16th meeting because I was out of town, but I was reading through the minutes, so I'll be abstaining later. And I noticed the report in here from Chair Roberts about the the paper street adjacent to 408 Van Buren Street had been, the city fence had been removed and plantings had been put in, and it looked like the land was being used as additional yard for that property. Has the city gone and looked at that property to see what's going on, and why isn't our fence there?
Well,
Because
the
that
fence
is,
was falling down.
okay,
Yeah.
There was a private fence on our property which needed to be removed,
okay.
so,
So that's okay then.
yeah.
But will the city be putting a fence in of our own on our property line, or?
We have
because-
not planned to do that, to
You drive by
put a
it,
new
it
fence on
doesn't
it.
look like public land, but it is public land, and I think it will cause people not to feel like they can use such public land. And we have this problem all over the city where people encroach upon public land, and especially, there's like a couple of different places where I can cut through the neighborhoods near my house that are very difficult, because people keep moving stuff into what is really a public pathway. And this is a public pathway.
Let me work with Director of Parks and Recreation to see what can be done. There had been talk too about possibly putting a trail through there
Right.
at some point, and there were varying opinions about whether that was a good idea or not. But
Well, I mean, the whole thing here is that
we did want to get the fence that was on our property off of our property,
Okay.
because that had kept it as though it were private yard for years.
So it was
Yeah.
it was further
Was
over, it
on it,
wasn't
yes.
actually on the property line? Well, the whole point was that, the zoning for that house was inappropriately done because they treated that public street as not being a street. And the whole point was, well, we're not gonna put a street there anyway, but we could use it for a pathway. So my feeling is we allowed someone to build a house inappropriately because we said we weren't gonna use the street. Well, we better put a pathway in. And it better be treated as public property, in my
Well,
mind.
that also is, I think, on the Ped Bike Plan, that was one of those areas that might be able to be used in that manner. And I think ultimately, we do want to put green on the plan there, where presently it's blank. We have several of those. We have several areas where we've done that proactively, but we have others that are blank still. And
Right.
there are about a half a dozen of them.
Just in that.
It's a good point.
In that same vein, this morning, I was doing an inspection of the WOND trail with the Northern Virginia Park Authority, because they've asked for some assistance to get the invasive plants off of the WOND trail, and I run the habitat restoration team for the city, and we do that in this park, so we get rid of the invasives and put in natives. So we were doing an inspection, and that area next to Great Falls and where the Cedar Lane trail should come in, that gentleman has moved his fence in, and now he's obscured that trail even more. Yeah, well, that garden is part of an old program the WOND had where they allowed people to do gardening on, and his garden is actually on Northern Virginia Park Authority property.
He blocks Cedar.
He has blocked Cedar more. I mean, he had blocked it some, but it's now blocked even more. And in fact, actually, the Park Authority rangers that were with us was unhappy because he had moved further into their right-of-way when he wasn't supposed to. So I think that's a whole other issue. But I do think
I
that
can give you another one
it's
as well.
becoming very difficult to use that Cedar Lane cut-through, and I think that it would be good for the city, since we've said this is going to be a trail, we plan it to be a trail, that we get some signage and get a little bit more of an open in there.
Well, one other thing I might mention, we have learned of an ongoing encroachment by the U-Haul property on the WNOD trail, where they started filling in with gravel and other debris. And it looks like they have been parking illegally on a portion of the WNOD property. So it is, I think there's an ongoing need, as we look at the WNOD trail, to figure out what right-of-way do they have, where is it, and who's using what. And that's something we're going to be meeting on with Public Works, and I think a letter has been sent out to that effect. Also, I would mention the commission, we have been working on, with Paul Stoddard and Mr. Kitt, a number of ideas and plans for the WNOD trail, which at some point we'd like to present to you and get your feedback on. Some pretty exciting ideas about how to do more with that space.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Meeks?
Just a quick follow-up. I didn't want to sort of get into it when we were doing the other thing, but, Parks and Rec, had the opportunity to talk to Parks and Rec vis-a-vis big chimneys. So if you have the opportunity to talk to the developer, it would be very helpful for them in a in a non-complicated way, understanding that there's the Cub Scout project there, if that park could be opened up when they have material there, so that berm, sort of, as you look at it, sort of to the right, is just opened up into the park. And I don't think that would be wildly expensive and is not a big ask. And would go a long way to making them a good neighbor. For a park that they're going to use more than anyone else.
Tells me we didn't get more.
Well, but that's all that they're really in a position to ask for, just the nature of the way this went. I think there's some very complicated engineering that's going to have to be done in the back of that park that we can't, I mean, it would be, if we had a year, I'm not sure we'd have the engineering done. And we clearly don't have a year, so. But opening the front of it would actually be an amenity to the building, I think.
Also, as you look at the site plan as it comes forward, you may want to look at the mid-block connection between the Annandale Road side of that project and Big Chimneys Park. There's some striping and some other things, but you may want to take a hard look at what you'd like to see there in terms of the curb line for Annandale Road.
The brick walk, which is very nice, but if they took the berm out, you know, opened
There's
it
a lot
up.
of paint and striping on the present plan that does not pull the curb out to make a stronger connection across to the park, which you may want to look at.
Berm it up, remove it. And when we have that Bobcat, maybe we can drive it down Cedar.
Take out a few tomato plants.
Okay. If there are no amendments or corrections to the minutes, I would entertain a motion to approve.
I move.
Second.
All those in favor, please say
Aye.
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 I abstain.
Yes.
Go for it.
The motion
Go for it,
carries.
Bob.
And
mean, Rob.
I and also entertain a motion to
Okay.
adjourn.
Come on. Come on, Rob.
Prior to making a motion to
I already
adjourn, I
guessed.
would like to guess 300.
I say 500.
There's only about 20 in here.
I don't know, but I don't know, but I ate a whole lot of your meetings.
I already gave you mine. 460.
Oh, my gosh. Yay.
What a woman.
And I'll tell you that the first planning commission meeting ever held was on November 9th, 1939. And there have been 51 different people who have prepared planning commission minutes.
Oh.
5 of us have exceeded 100 meetings, and 18 people have only attended 1 meeting.
That wasn't during our tenure. That must have been.
And I think
That
we
was-
should
must have
add
been when
that
Mr. Quinn
information
was
to
on
our
the
minutes.
Well, thank you, Deborah. This was a very nice treat. It got me through dinner. Yes. All right. It's been moved and seconded that we adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Meeting is adjourned.